Welcome back. All right, so Philadelphia. Now this is one of those rarities too, where for back-to-back videos I'm wearing a Flyers jersey, but not the same Flyers jersey because I'm not gonna be that lazy. I have been that lazy, but not for a very long time. So unless it's after I've come home from a hockey game I was at and I'm tired and I'm late, those seem to be exceptions. So for the Philadelphia Flyers, the real headline with this team was made on March the 10th, where Chuck Fletcher was out as general manager. He was replaced by Daniel Briere on an interim basis, although word has been that Daniel Briere is highly likely to stick around as the general manager. That once they've, dotted the I's, crossed the T's, that he'll end up being the manager of the team. Now, this is one that he has said that they want to do a rebuild with, and Flyers fans have been screaming for a rebuild for some time. Being a Canucks fan, I can identify and relate to that. So, for the Flyers, they've missed the playoffs in 5 of the last 7 seasons. They've missed the playoffs in the last 3. They had been in an alternating pattern of making and missing the playoffs, and they broke that pattern by just flat out missing them. So 2019-2020 was the last time they made the playoffs, and they were good that year. They lost in the second round against the Islanders. It was simply a matter of they couldn't score enough goals. And I know that sounds really simple because, of course, the team that scores more goals tends to win, but their offense wasn't where you wanted it to be. The goaltending was good, the defense was solid, and then it kind of fell apart. 2020, 2021, they finished 25, 23, and 8. That's, of course, where they were just playing in that Eastern Division, which was just a group of death. And it was a tough year. They finished above 500, just barely, but they haven't since. Last year, they were 25, 46, and 11, which was seen as bottom. They bring in John Tortorella. Through Tortorella's coaching and some smart moves that he made, they end up 31, 30, 38, and 13. So they stayed competitive for as long as they could. They would go on losing streaks, but there would be winning streaks to follow. And so, as up and down as the season was, it ends up with them below 500. It ends up with them in a position where they're towards the bottom of the standings, and the fan base finally gets somebody announcing they're going to do the rebuild. But what kind of rebuild is the question? Now, everybody, I would think, is acquirable. Nobody's untouchable on this team. But the price you're going to pay for some of these players is going to be pretty high. So we'll look at Konechny first because the price to acquire Konechny would likely be quite high. In 2020, 2021, he had 50 games played, 11 goals, 23 assists, 34 points. Last year in 79 games, 16 goals, 36 assists, 52 points. Easy for me to say. But there was a lot of criticism about Konechny coming out of both of those seasons. This year, he did quite well. Now, he only played 60 games due to injury, but 31 goals, 30 assists, 61 points. So his numbers were solid, and he led the team in scoring. And so for Konechny and the Flyers, I think this is a marriage that works, and I think Konechny probably sticks around. I think Tippett sticks around as well with Florida in 2020, 2021, 45 games, 7 goals, 11 assists, 18 points. Last year, before the trade to Philly, he played 42 games in Florida, 6 goals, 8 assists, 14 points. And then after the trade to Philly, he played half the number of games he played in Florida, and he scored half the number of points. So things didn't really change. 21 games, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points. But for me, I felt like he seemed more comfortable in Philadelphia, and even though the scoring wasn't there, I thought he should do well, and then he did. This year in 72 games, 27 goals, 22 assists, 49 points. And it felt like when I was recapping the games the Flyers were playing, I was praising Tippett a lot. And a lot of Tippett was their best forward on the ice, and that was even in games where maybe he didn't have points and goals. So the future's pretty bright for Tippett, which is why sometimes when these young guys trade teams and everybody's saying, well, that guy's a bust, my answer is not necessarily. Sometimes it's about finding the right spot for you. Morgan Frost, 2020, 2021, just 2 games played, no points. Last year in 55 games, 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 points, and there was some question about how much upside was still there. This year he performed well enough, 81 games, 19 goals, 27 assists, 46 points. And then in net, you have somebody who's kind of divisive, right? Carter Hart, is he a good goaltender? My answer is yes. Your answer may be different. 2020, 2021, rough year for him. 9-11 and 5 was his record, 877 save percentage. And then last year, he ended up 13, 24, and 7 with a 905 save percentage. And I said he was playing well, and the numbers just didn't show it. This year, kind of the same thing. He ends up 22, 23, and 10 with a 907 save percentage. So the save percentage is not that 9-10 plus that you would want for a number one goaltender. but it's not bad. And really, with the defense in front of him as it's been, it's understandable that he would struggle to keep his save percentage in that 9-10 or a 9-10 or higher range. But I do think Carter Hart's going to be the guy. But as soon as the rebuild word came out of this organization, immediately I saw articles on what Carter Hart would be worth. Would they trade Carter Hart? The answer might be yes to that. But again, I don't think they're just going to give Carter Hart up. I think that it's going to be a pretty good return they'd get on Hart, or they'll just hold on to him. So this year's unrestricted free agents, you have James Van Riemsdyk, who was, of course, traded and then not traded on trade day, which, ultimately probably sealed the fate for Chuck Fletcher. Brendan Lemieux, who was acquired at the deadline. I'm on the fence about whether or not Philadelphia ends up re-signing him. I did think he was more prominent with Philly than he was in LA before the trade. Jackson Cates, who spent a lot of the season in the minors, which was good because when you have both Cateses in the lineup and the announcers don't necessarily say which Cates is which, it can get confusing. It's something that drives me crazy now with hockey is when you've got more than one guy with the same last name on the team, and either the announcer's just saying Johnson or Smith, and on the back of their jersey, obviously the number tells you, but there's no denotation either. Like there isn't always the initial before the last name. So with Braun, of course, having retired, there's no conversation to be had now about Justin Braun coming back. I do wish him happiness in his retirement from the National Hockey League. And if he chooses to keep himself in the hockey world and do hockey things, I wish him all the best in that too. But for Braun being out, there is still an issue on this blue line that needs to be addressed. That being said, if they're going into a rebuild, how seriously do they address that? Their RFA list, Kiefer Bellows, I'd be very surprised if he gets a qualifying offer. They probably don't give him a qualifying offer. He probably ends up going to unrestricted free agency. There's Noah Cates. Noah Cates, I think, had a good season. I think he's earned himself a solid amount of money. Frost and York are up. Now, Cam York is potentially a big one. The thing is, they already gave out big contracts to Sanheim and Ristolainen, which we will talk about in this video, of course. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult with Cam York because their cap space for this summer is $8,888,976. Cam York is a really solid young defenseman. It is in their best interest to give him, I would say, a deal similar to what Samuelsson got in Buffalo. I would say a deal similar to that, which eats into a lot of that cap space. And by similar, he probably gets more money than Samuelsson does in Buffalo, right? And of course, Frost has earned himself some money. He's a 20 goal scorer now. So I know he had 19, but he's going to be a 20 goal scorer, you would think. So they're going to make some money. If you want to improve this team, and again, I know rebuilding and all that, but you also, if you're going to be rebuilding, you want to make sure you have cap space so you can be, a broker at trade deadline time and to give yourself that freedom. Maybe you're going to take on a contract from another team, that kind of thing, right? So in the event that they were trying to move guys with term left, Kevin Hayes' name might come up. Now, at $7.14 million, that's an expensive cap hit. It's until 2026. It might be more palatable for a team to trade for him next year when the flat cap era is officially done. Lawton, $3 million till 2026. I think if they made Lawton available, I think there'd be takers. At $3 million, I think that's a decent cap hit. Delorier at $1.75 million till 2026. There may very well be a taker for Delorier as well. Provorov at $6.75 million until 2025. Provorov had, a couple of really fantastic seasons there. I don't think he's bad at this point, but I do think that if this is really about a rebuild, how long is that rebuild? If you envision that the rebuild's going to go on for a while, 4+ years, maybe it's in your best interest to move on from Provorov because his contract's up in 2 years. And maybe you're not envisioning him sticking around, or maybe he wouldn't stick around, right? So, there's a reason for exit interviews at the end of the year, and that may very well be something you discuss with a player at the end of the year. So where do you see yourself 3 years from now? And if the answer is, I was thinking LA's nice that time at that point, probably, time to move on. But we'll see what they do with Provorov. And then, of course, there's the Ristolainen contract. $5.1 million cap hit until 2027. Can you buy it out? Probably not. There may be buyouts on this from this organization, but Ristolainen's contract, it didn't look great when they signed it, and it's one that's kind of hanging around their necks right now and weighing them down a bit. So yeah, Chuck Fletcher and the contracts he signed, it's going to be tough for Briere to clean that up if in fact he becomes the full-time general manager. And then there's Tony DeAngelo, $5 million contract through next year. Clearly, with DeAngelo being a healthy scratch a lot, with the Flyers deciding to go with 13 forwards and 5 defensemen to make him a healthy scratch at points as well down the stretch, this does not work. So DeAngelo at $5 million, is there a team out there that would look at that and go, his offense is worth whatever deficiencies he has on defense? Or that says, yeah, he has deficiencies on defense, but we have somebody who can do for him what Slavin did for him in Carolina, so we'll be fine. So DeAngelo, I would think probably ends up getting moved because there's just the 1 year left on that contract. Sanheim, probably not getting moved. $6.25 million contract extension kicks in this summer, and he's signed through 2031. So the math here, let's see, that's 11, 16, 21, about $22 million gets you Provorov, Ristolainen, DeAngelo, and Sanheim. So that's a lot of cap space right there that gets eaten up by these contracts. And while I may not have a problem with one individually, collectively, it's a lot of money for a defense that just didn't perform well enough this year. Now, they got the best defensive numbers they could get out of this team with Tortorella behind the bench, but I do expect some changes next year. I don't know which of these defensemen go. I would say DeAngelo's the easiest one to move out of the 4. Provorov probably a close second. And then Ristolainen and Sanheim, I think you're kind of stuck with. So that's $11.35 million between those two in your cap space. And then you get into the wounded, right? The guys who probably don't play. You've got Couturier, $7.75 million till 2030. He should be ready to go for training camp, but I don't think any of us envisioned him missing as much of the season as he has. And that's, of course, after last season where, injury and whatnot. So the idea that Couturier could play 82 games, I think we can sort of probably say that likely doesn't happen. He would probably need some form of load management from here and just in general. Hopefully he's 100% in the fall, but we'll see. But that contract's through 2030, so that's a bit of an ouch. And yeah, you can put it on LTIR, but LTIR is kind of a pain. Teams are finding out what a pain that could be. Atkinson, $5.87 million contract till 2025. If I had said when Atkinson got traded for Voracek, that probably won't matter. They're both going to get hurt and they won't play that much anyways. I think I rightfully would have been told I was crazy. But that's kind of where we're at. Voracek's contract's been traded since then. He's likely done. Atkinson didn't play. And again, it's been kind of cloak and dagger on how long he might be out. And will he come back and all that fun stuff. And then there's Ellis. Ellis's career's probably done. $6.25 million cap hit until 2027. So that's what, $19 million in cap between Couturier, Atkinson, and Ellis, combined with the $20+ million. So that's about $40 million of their salary cap right there, just on the board there with guys who are on the blue line and players who are injured and not likely to play. So it gets kind of tough. And then next summer, when the salary cap mercifully is going up, Hart and Tippett are up as restricted free agents. So for Hart and Tippett, Tippett, I think, is sticking around in Philly for quite some time. But if they do decide to move Carter Hart, the fact that he's a restricted free agent in 2024, maybe you're better off signing him to an extension and then looking at making that trade. And how much is that extension worth? So question marks out there for Philadelphia that they have to answer this summer, because it depends on what kind of rebuild this is. Is this a tear everything down? Or is this a, we're going to sell off a few guys now, we're going to pick up some draft picks, and we'll see how this year goes. And then if this coming year they're not that bad, maybe we start building up quickly. But, it could very well be everything must go waterbed warehouse type sale. So they started the season 3-0. And really, Tortorella got the best out of him he could. From November 10th to 26th, they lost 10 in a row. They were 0-7-3 through that stretch. December 29th through January 14th, they won 7 out of 8 there. February 11th to March 14th, they lost 12 out of 15. They were 3-10-2. So they had good stretches, bad stretches throughout. They had a winning streak towards the end of the season as well, which probably costs them a couple of spots in the lottery standings and in the draft overall. But as Tortorella said, he wanted to play games that mattered. And so Tortorella's voice may matter in this process too. He may go to Daniel Briere and say, look, I don't want to be a part of a rebuild that's along the same lines as Arizona. I don't want to be in one like what Chicago did, where they just trade everybody and burn it to the ground. So it will be interesting to see how those conversations go, if we hear anything about them, and what the plan's going to be around the Philadelphia Flyers. Because this is a team that likely isn't in the mix next year for the playoffs, but the moves you make this summer could decide how many years it is before they're talked about as a playoff team again. So their chance of acquiring Bedard in the draft, 6.5%. They are number 7 in the draft. So I've been going one by one down the standings, so those odds are going to improve as I go through and finish this series out. But yeah, pre-lottery, they're number 7. There's a chance they end up drafting first, second, 7th, 8th, 9th, anywhere in that range. But this is a good deep draft. If they end up drafting 7th, they're going to get a good player. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.